Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going behind the curtain a bit at the SEC.
Ooh, exciting.
Right, we're exploring all their activities and the controversies swirling around their role in digital assets.
I do love a good controversy.
Who doesn't? Today's source material is a doozy.
Diana, me.
We're dissecting the YouTube video of SEC Chair Gary Gensler's testimony before the House Financial Services Committee.
That sounds pretty dense,
It is.
but also fascinating.
Definitely. It's a wild ride, for sure.
You know, what I think is really interesting about this hearing,
That's that.
it's not just about what the SEC is doing.
Right.
It's also about what people think they're doing
Okay.
or what they should be doing.
I see.
It's like this clash of perspectives on the SEC's effectiveness,
Okay.
like how they're handling new tech like crypto,
Uh-huh.
and even some internal drama.
Ooh, drama.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, let's start with the House committee members.
Okay.
They really went after the SEC for what they called regulation by enforcement when it comes to crypto.
Regulation by enforcement.
Yeah, basically they're saying the SEC is playing gotcha with these companies,
What do you mean?
like letting them operate in this gray area
Mm-hmm.
and then just dropping the hammer with like fines and lawsuits.
So instead of setting clear rules up front,
Exactly.
they're just waiting for someone to slip up?
Exactly. And the committee argued that this approach,
Yeah.
it's creating total chaos in the crypto space.
Makes sense.
It makes it really tough for companies to innovate
Right.
and for investors to know like what's safe and what's not.
I see. So it's harming the industry overall.
And some even said that all of this is pushing the U.S. behind
Behind.
in the global fintech race.
Interesting.
But you know what? They weren't just complaining generally.
Okay.
They had some concrete examples
Oh, really?
of companies getting caught in this like regulatory maze.
Like who?
Coinbase,
Coinbase. That's
one of the biggest crypto exchanges out there.
Yeah, no, Coinbase.
They actually testified that they tried to register with the SEC.
Okay.
Get this, 30 times.
30 times.
30 times. And they were met with radio silence.
And then what?
And then, bam, hit with a Wells notice.
Oh, it's a Wells notice.
Basically a legal warning shot from the SEC.
Okay.
Like saying, we're watching you, and we might come after you.
Yikes.
That without specifying what for.
So basically, it's like getting a letter saying you're in trouble,
Right.
but you have no idea what you did.
It's terrifying.
So how are these companies supposed to play by the rules if
Right.
they don't even know what the rules are?
That's precisely the point the committee was making.
Okay.
They're saying this lack of clarity
Yeah.
is stifling innovation and driving businesses away from the U.S.
It sounds like the SEC has some explaining to do.
For sure.
And speaking of murky waters, what about Ether?
Oh, yeah.
You know, the second largest cryptocurrency after Bitcoin.
Right, right.
The SEC has been super cagey about whether they consider it a security or not.
Ah, yes, the curious case of Ether.
So what's the deal with that?
This lack of clarity has huge consequences.
How so?
Well, because if Ether is classified as a security, then it would fall under this whole different set of regulations.
Okay.
And how does that affect, regular people?
Right. The average person who holds Ether.
Exactly.
They just want to know what's going on.
Right. And imagine you're, I don't know,
Yeah.
holding some Ether.
Hoping it takes off.
Yeah, hoping it moons or something.
Right.
But the SEC can't even decide.
If it's a security.
Yeah, it's like playing financial roulette.
Totally.
It's almost impossible to make informed investment decisions
Yeah.
when the regulators are sending these mixed signals.
That's a really good point.
And you know what?
Wait.
There are real-world examples
Oh, really?
of this confusion playing out.
Like what?
There's this company called Prometheum.
Okay, I've heard of them.
They have a special purpose broker-dealer license,
Okay.
which means they're only allowed to hold assets
Yeah.
that are considered securities.
I see.
And they recently launched this Ether custody service.
Uh,
Now, if Ether wasn't a security,
yeah.
the SEC would have stopped them,
I guess so.
but they didn't.
So did the SEC just implicitly classify Ether as a security?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nobody seems to know for sure.
It's like another example of this ambiguity that's
Okay.
just creating so much uncertainty
Yeah.
and potentially putting investors at risk.
Yeah, it's not a great look for them.
Okay, so we've got the SEC seemingly playing gotcha
Uh-huh.
with all these crypto companies
Yeah.
and sending these mixed messages about what even counts as a security.
Totally.
This is all starting to sound a bit concerning.
It is concerning.
Like really concerning.
Because remember,
Yeah.
the SEC is supposed to be protecting investors,
Yeah,
not adding to the confusion.
right,
Okay.
exactly.
But you know what? The
Right.
concerns from this hearing
Yeah.
weren't just limited to crypto. The committee also took aim at the SEC's overall power, especially when it comes to ESG disclosure.
Yeah, environmental,
social, and governance disclosure.
Okay, got it.
Sorry.
That's all right.
ESG has become such a hot-button issue.
It has.
Some people say companies should have to disclose more information.
About things like environmental impact and social responsibility stuff.
Right.
While others say it's government overreach.
Yeah, it's complicated.
So where does the SEC stand on all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Committee members from both parties, Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
They voiced concerns about the SEC potentially overstepping
their authority?
Yeah.
Like, are they trying to do too much?
Right. They questioned whether the SEC even has the legal right to demand information that isn't directly related to a company's financial performance.
I see. It seems like a pretty big deal. If they're making companies jump through hoops for information that's not even relevant to investors.
Yeah, it's a valid concern.
Did the committee get any answers from the SEC on this?
Well, there was this one exchange.
Okay.
It was really illuminating.
Tell me about it.
This representative, I don't remember his name.
That's okay.
He asked point blank if there was any law passed by Congress that gives the SEC the power force companies to disclose information, environmental or social issues.
Especially if it's not financially material.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and what did the SEC say to that?
It was pretty interesting, actually.
Okay.
She basically said that the fundamental basis for any required disclosure is whether it's financially material.
Like, does it affect the company's bottom line?
Exactly.
In a way that's important for investors.
Right. So like forcing companies to report on their carbon emissions.
Or diversity statistics.
Yeah, that would require clear direction from Congress.
Interesting.
So it sounds like even within the SEC, they're acknowledging that their power isn't unlimited.
That makes sense.
They can't just go around demanding any information they want.
Yeah.
They have to operate within the bounds of the law.
I see. That's good to know.
But wait, did we say there was some internal drama brewing at the SEC?
Oh, yes, we did.
It gets even juicier.
Okay, I'm hooked.
Turns out there might be some serious disagreements.
Within the SEC?
Yeah, like about how things are being run.
Oh.
One commissioner, who's been with the SEC for nearly 2 decades.
Wow, that's a long time.
He actually described the current rulemaking environment under Chair Gensler as below average.
Below average?
Yeah.
That's pretty harsh, especially coming from someone who's been there so long.
I know, right?
What exactly did he mean by below average?
Well, he pointed to what he sees as a significant decline in the quality of analysis and preparation.
For rulemaking decisions?
Yes. And he even said that in his nearly 20 years at the SEC, he's never seen such a lack of thorough analysis and consideration.
Consideration of?
Public feedback when making rules.
Wow, that's a pretty serious accusation.
It is.
I mean, we're talking about the agency that's responsible for protecting trillions of dollars in investments.
Yeah.
If they're rushing through regulations without doing their due diligence, that could have huge repercussions.
It could.
But the entire market and for our investments, too.
Exactly. And this internal friction at the SEC.
Yeah.
It's just one more layer of complexity.
I know.
In this already messy regulatory landscape.
This is all getting pretty heavy.
It is.
And I'm sure there's a lot more to unpack.
Oh, there's definitely more.
But before we dive into the next part, let's pause and make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay, sounds good.
So, you're listening to The Deep Dive.
That's right.
And we are dissecting the SEC Chair's testimony before Congress.
Love it.
So far, we've seen that the SEC is facing criticism for their regulation by enforcement approach to crypto, their murky stance on Ether, and their potential overreach into ESG disclosures.
Right.
Plus, it seems like there's some serious internal drama brewing within the agency itself.
Definitely brewing.
Stay tuned because we're just getting started.
Can't wait. So we left off talking about those potential internal disagreements within the SEC.
Right.
But that wasn't the only thing that was causing concern.
Okay.
There were also worries
about
the sheer volume of rules.
Rules.
Yeah, that are coming out of the SEC.
The Chair Gensler?
Yes, exactly.
Like they're trying to remake the entire financial system overnight or something.
Right. It's this frenzied and rushed approach. I think that's how one of the committee members put it.
Whoa, hold on. Are they really churning out that many rules?
Well, several committee members definitely thought so.
Okay.
They pointed out that the number of rules proposed under Chair Gensler has been, pretty significant, especially in such a short period of time.
I see. But didn't Chair Gensler push back on that a little bit?
He did.
Didn't he say that the actual number of rules finalized under his watch is on par with or even less than some of his predecessors?
He did. He did say that.
So what's the issue then?
Well, here's the catch.
Okay.
And this is where it gets interesting for you as an investor.
All right, I'm listening.
It's not just about the number of rules.
Okay.
It's about the scope and complexity.
Of the rules.
Yes.
Exactly.
So we're not talking about just like simple tweaks here and there.
No, not at all.
These are major overhauls with the
Major.
potential to reshape entire industries.
Exactly. And you have to think about it.
Right.
If the SEC is trying to push through all these complex rules in such a short amount of time.
Does that raise questions about whether they're really taking the time
to
consider all the angles?
To gather input from experts.
Exactly. And stakeholders.
And just making sure these rules are going to actually work in the real world.
Right. It's a valid concern.
And I think I remember some people were saying that the public doesn't even have enough time
Oh, yeah, that's a big
to give meaningful feedback on these rules.
For sure.
If they're being rolled out so quickly.
Exactly. One representative, I think it was, he actually pointed out that, just comparing the number of rules proposed under different chairs doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
It's the substance of those rules.
Okay.
Their interconnectedness and the sheer volume of information in each proposal.
That makes it so hard for regular people to give feedback.
Exactly. It makes it hard for businesses.
Industry experts.
Yeah, everyone.
You're bombarded with all this stuff.
It's overwhelming.
How are you supposed to even know where to start?
Right. And remember, the SEC relies heavily on public comments to refine its rules.
To make sure they actually work?
Yes, exactly.
But it seems like they're almost shooting themselves in the foot.
It does, doesn't it?
If they're making it harder for people to give feedback.
Right, because if the process feels rushed or overly complex, people just aren't going to engage.
And that undermines the quality of the feedback.
Exactly.
So did this rushed approach actually backfire in any specific instances?
There were a couple of rules that came up repeatedly.
Okay. Like what?
The custody rule
Okay.
and the predictive data analytics rule.
I vaguely remember those.
Yeah, both of these rules, they seem to cause some major headaches in the market.
Oh, no.
And it sounds like the SEC had to scramble to make some pretty significant revisions after the fact.
Oh, to try and address unintended consequences.
No, exactly.
Sounds like a classic case of measure twice, cut once.
Right.
If they had just taken a little more time up front to get more input from experts.
And stakeholders.
They could have avoided all this mess.
Exactly. And some committee members even argued that.
What?
A more collaborative approach might be better.
Like holding roundtables.
Exactly.
And conducting more thorough fact-finding.
Yes, because that could help the SEC identify potential issues early on.
And avoid these costly revisions.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive.
So we've got concerns about the quantity of rules coming from the SEC. But what about the quality of the rules?
That's a big question, too.
Were there any specific areas where the committee was like, are you guys even focusing on the right things?
Oh, yeah. And this brings us back to that hot button issue of ESG disclosures.
ESG, right.
Several committee members question whether the SEC's focus on ESG might be a little,
a little misplaced.
Yeah, a little misplaced.
I remember there was some back and forth about whether the SEC even has the authority to require companies to report on things like
their environmental impact.
Right, or their diversity practices.
Exactly. Did the hearing shed any more light on that debate?
Well, there's this one exchange. It was really illuminating.
Tell me about it.
This representative, I think he was pretty skeptical. He asked point blank if there was any specific law passed by Congress that gives the SEC the power to force companies to disclose information about environmental or social issues if that information isn't considered financially material.
Right. So what did the SEC commissioners say to that?
It was pretty interesting, actually.
Oh.
She pointed to certain cases where Congress had specifically directed them to require disclosures, even if those disclosures weren't strictly related to a company's financial performance.
I see.
She mentioned conflict minerals as an example.
Conflict minerals.
Yeah, remind me what those are again?
Basically, these are minerals that are mined in conflict zones.
Oh, God.
And often used to fund armed groups.
Oh, right.
Congress passed a law requiring companies to disclose whether they use conflict minerals in their products.
Okay.
Even if it doesn't have a direct impact on their bottom line.
So in that case, Congress made it clear that they wanted this information disclosed.
Exactly, regardless of financial materiality.
Got it.
But when it came to broader ESG disclosures...
Like requiring companies to report on their carbon emissions?
Right, exactly.
The SEC commissioner basically said that their baseline is still financial materiality.
If it affects a company's bottom line.
In a way that's important for investors to know?
Yes.
Then they might require disclosure.
Okay.
But anything beyond that would need clear direction from Congress.
Interesting.
So it sounds like the SEC is acknowledging that they can't just go around demanding any information they want.
They have to operate within the bounds of the law.
Exactly. Which makes sense.
It does.
This whole debate about ESG disclosures really highlights this tension between the SEC's role as a market regulator and the growing pressure on companies to address
broader societal concerns.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Yeah, definitely.
And you know what?
What?
Let's not forget about the crypto elephant in the room.
Yeah, right, crypto.
We talked about the SEC's regulation by enforcement approach earlier.
We did.
But it sounds like the committee had some more pointed questions about how the SEC is handling this whole digital asset revolution.
Yeah, it does seem like they're struggling to keep up.
Well, several committee members directly challenged the SEC's approach.
Okay.
They argued that this lack of clear rules for crypto is creating massive uncertainty.
Makes sense.
And actually hindering innovation in the space.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
What is?
The SEC is supposed to be fostering capital formation.
Right.
But some people say their approach to crypto is doing the exact opposite.
Driving investment overseas.
Exactly.
It's a valid concern.
Did any of the representatives have any, particularly strong words for the SEC's crypto strategy?
One representative used a phrase that really stuck with me.
What was that?
He called it Hotel California rules.
Ooh, I like that. What did he mean by that?
Basically, he was saying that the SEC is telling crypto companies, you can check in anytime you like.
Okay.
But you can never leave.
So they can register with the SEC.
They can, technically.
But they can never really get the clarity.
Or the approval.
That they need to operate with certainty.
Right. They're always at risk of getting hit with a Wells notice or something.
It's like regulatory purgatory.
Exactly. They're stuck.
And that kind of uncertainty.
It's a killer for any business.
Especially in an industry like crypto that's moving so fast.
Couldn't agree more.
And it's not just about clarity. There were some pretty serious concerns about whether the SEC is even operating within its legal authority when it comes to crypto.
Right. Do they even have the power to regulate these assets?
Exactly.
That was a big point of contention.
And it all hinges on whether these crypto assets are considered securities.
Which, of course, nobody can seem to agree on.
Right. That classification determines which regulations apply.
It's a crucial distinction.
And there's been some pushback on the SEC's authority to even use the term digital asset security.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Didn't one representative bring up the fact that the SEC's own lawyers had to, retract that term?
Yeah.
In a recent court filing?
They admitted it doesn't actually appear in any law passed by Congress.
That's pretty huge.
Right.
It just highlights how ambiguous the SEC's approach is.
And raises serious questions about whether they're overstepping their bounds.
Totally.
And you know what else?
What?
Remember all those massive fines the SEC has been giving out to crypto companies?
Oh, yeah. Those are making headlines.
Well, one representative called it a cash cow for the SEC.
A cash cow? What do you mean?
Basically, he argued that many of those fines are based on record-keeping issues rather than actual fraud or harm to customers.
Interesting. So instead of going after, the bad actors?
The real criminals?
Who are actually defrauding people?
Exactly.
They're focusing on technicalities?
And paperwork violations.
It seems like they might be more interested in generating revenue than actually addressing the wrongdoing and protecting investors.
That's a pretty serious accusation.
It is.
But even if those fines are justified, wouldn't it be better to just have clear rules in place?
So that companies can avoid those violations in the first place.
Right. And some committee members argue that a more collaborative approach might be more effective.
Like working with the crypto companies?
Exactly. To develop sensible regulations.
That would be good for everyone.
It would protect investors. And foster innovation.
Okay, so we've got concerns about the quantity of rules, the quality of rules, the focus on ESG, and this whole crypto mess.
It's a lot.
It seems like the SEC has a lot on its plate.
They do?
But the hearing didn't just focus on what the SEC is doing outside the agency.
What else did it focus on?
It also took a deep dive into their internal workings.
Oh, juicy.
And what they found there wasn't exactly reassuring.
Oh, no. What happened?
Well, remember earlier when we talked about that commissioner?
Yeah.
Who called the current SEC rulemaking environment below average?
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Well, the committee really dug into that comment.
Oh, I bet they did.
And his response was pretty revealing.
He basically said they're not properly reviewing the feedback they get from the public.
Really?
Yeah, he described the significant decline in the quality of analysis and preparation for rulemaking decisions.
So they're just like pushing through these rules without really thinking about the consequences.
That's what it sounds like. And he even said that in his nearly 2 decades at the SEC,
wow,
he's never seen such a lack of,
lack of what?
Detailed summaries.
Okay.
And thorough analysis of the public comment file.
Hold on, he's saying they're not even properly reviewing the feedback they're getting.
Yeah, it seems that way.
But isn't that like a crucial part of the rulemaking process?
Absolutely, it is.
I mean, how can they make effective rules if they're just ignoring what people are telling them?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what the committee was getting at.
Right. It's not supposed to be this top-down process.
Exactly.
Where the SEC just dictates rules from on high.
It's supposed to be a collaborative effort.
Right, with input from everyone.
Companies, investors,
experts,
all the stakeholders.
Yeah, if they're not taking the time to consider that feedback.
It raises serious questions about the rules they're putting out.
Not just about, like, a bureaucratic process either.
Right.
This could have real consequences for the markets, for people's investment.
Absolutely. The committee pointed out that when the SEC doesn't consider the total cost of its regulations, it can end up hurting businesses, investors.
And the whole U.S. economy.
Exactly.
They even brought up a specific example.
What was that?
Something called SAB 121.
Oh, right. ACB 121. I remember that.
Remind me what that was again.
It was a staff accounting bulletin.
Okay.
That basically threw a wrench into how crypto companies account for assets.
On their books.
Yeah.
It sounds messy.
It was very messy. It created a lot of confusion and uncertainty.
I bet.
And many people argue that it was just another example. The SEC trying to,
shoehorn a new technology into an old system.
Exactly. Trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
It got so bad that both the House and the Senate voted to overturn it.
Wow, really?
Yeah, but it was ultimately vetoed by the president.
So it's still in effect?
Technically, yes.
Wow.
But it sounds like even the SEC is starting to realize they might have messed up.
Well, they're engaging in one-on-one conversations now. With market participants.
To do what?
To decide on a case-by-case basis whether they need to comply with SABM 121.
Wait, so they're making exceptions for some companies but not others?
That's what it sounds like.
That doesn't seem very fair.
It's not. It creates this uneven playing field.
And it just makes it even harder for companies to understand the rules.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's recap what we've learned today.
Right.
We started with concerns about the SEC's approach to crypto regulation.
That regulation by enforcement strategy.
Right, which is creating more confusion than clarity.
Definitely.
Then we talked about ESG disclosures.
Right.
And whether the SEC is overstepping its bounds there.
Yeah, demanding information that might not be relevant.
Exactly.
It's a tricky issue.
And then finally, we got this glimpse behind the curtain at the SEC itself.
Ooh, behind the curtain. I like it.
There are potential internal disagreements about how the agency is run and concerns about the quality of their rulemaking process.
Lots to think about.
I think so, right?
It really highlights this tension
between
the need for rules
to protect investors, right?
Exactly. To ensure fairness and transparency.
But at the same time,
too much regulation can stifle innovation
and hurt the very people the SEC is trying to protect.
It's a delicate balance.
That they don't seem to be striking very well right now.
Right. And the decisions they make.
Yeah.
They impact everyone.
Businesses, investors, the whole economy.
Exactly. It's important stuff.
Well, that was a lot to absorb today.
It was a deep dive for sure.
We covered so much ground.
From crypto to ESG to internal SEC drama.
And you know what?
Yeah.
I think this conversation has raised even more questions than it answered.
That's the beauty of a deep dive, though, isn't it?
It is. It gets you thinking, digging deeper.
Exploring these complex issues.
And hopefully this deep dive has given you a better understanding of all these moving parts.
The challenges facing the SEC.
And how it all impacts you.
Yeah. Your financial well-being.
Exactly. And here's a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay, I'm ready.
If one of the SEC's core missions is to facilitate capital formation,
right,
is its current approach actually hindering that goal?
Interesting question.
Are the costs of all this regulation outweighing the benefits?
Especially for smaller businesses and startups.
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.